So in asking some of these questions, I said I would look at some of my own work, particularly the Hutch Owen comic strips I did from about 2006 to 2008 or something like that. So I'm going to flip through these kind of quickly and just sort of like talk about how I might have done things a little bit differently. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll probably steal your ideas if you don't mind, if I ever go back to this material. Um, so this is the book that still is in progress of Hutch Owen comic strips. Um, who are the people? These were the people. They were four characters. Um, this is the only time I put them in um, the same panel, I think, or these two instances. They've separated from the larger society. Here they are on the top. They're watching a George Bush speech. On the bottom is when they first sort of seceded um, or attempted to secede from the country. Um, I never made them a unified force very much, and starting to think that um, who are the people, I maybe should have made them a unified force a little more often. Often, um, they collected, certainly in the space where they are, the junkyard, and I'll talk about that in a second. Um, but I never really made them a unit that often, except for these two panels, and I wonder if that's some way I could have gone a little deeper. What's revered, it's two things that they have their values, which I sort of rant about a lot, of personal freedom and respect and things like that. But ultimately, I think the strip was about attention, especially because there was a big commercial aspect to it where Hutch was trying to bring attention to the junkyard. Um, and so down here, you see this character is he's trying to quote straighten out their message. Here, this character is trying to streamline their message. Here, um, he's trying to reach the people. It was often about just being heard, a little more than in general. The Hutch character was about personal freedom, I think, the freedom of the heart and of the mind. So who are the others? The others were the corporate people, the corporate sort of corporate colonizers. I played them for laughs a lot, even though they rule. They are the winners. But so here they're just having a silly meeting. Um, and who can imagine what happens in those meetings? Sometimes it seems like they're just gobbling like chickens. Um, the I think this is one area in which I was constantly actually doing the right thing. I think I was always pitting the people and the others against each other pretty often, which makes for decent drama. What are the rules? Um, this was a silly example where the Oswald character says, "Hey Hutch, I want you to sign this. It's a loyalty oath." He has all the characters in the sort of junkyard signing these loyalty oaths. It's strips like this remind me. I don't think there's another, right? That those kinds of things could have been done a little more. I could have gone a little deeper and done um, uh, structured rules that everyone had to abide by. That would have been good. I think it would have been good to play for laughs, of course. What are the rituals? I found going through the archives that accidentally one of the rituals was to fall down on the ground or just collapse into the ground and give up, which happened over and over and over again. I don't know how many slides I have of that, but here's Hutch wrapping himself into a sleeping bag. Move me closer to the embers so I can die warm. Here he is with some flowers lying on his back. Oswald is waiting to throw him on the compost pile. No, there's not more examples, but I've realized that I have tons of these examples, and anyone who knows my Bia's dying work, it's the same image. So I think there's another presentation at some point about how we all tend to repeat ourselves ritualistically. What is reviled? Um, in my case, it's pretty clear cut. It's the corporatization of things. It's the colonizing by corporate forces of our culture. And so that was often depicted as something that was reviled at one of the larger forces that was, or the largest force, frankly, that this strip was about. The greedy corporate, American corporate machine, greed, et cetera, greedy, greedy. It's over and over again. What are the places? And I mentioned the junkyard. It's later they brand the junkyard Trashistan. They try and bring people in. Um, they view it as a holy place. The corporate people start to they destroy it, bulldoze over it, make it an amusement park called Rebelville. So it's the same location, it's the same place, but it's been raised and colonized. Um, so I wish I did more with that. To be honest, now that I see these two strips, which were probably 2 years apart or something. Oh no, same year. Um, but I think I wish I had done more with the actual place. Um, Comic strips are wonderful, and it's certainly there was a lot there to explore. What are the symbols? This was so silly. Um, I mentioned the corporatization and the colonization, and so what happened was, at least in one example, I didn't do much with the symbols except in this example, I think, where suddenly they're seeing celebrities everywhere. Um, I'm so sick of seeing celebrities everywhere on ads, people's shirts and shoes. And then he says that old pizza box looks like Angelina Jolie. And in this strip, which is one of my favorites, just because I love collage so much, everybody is starting to look like Tom Cruise to him, or everybody has literally turned into Tom Cruise. And so it's part of the symbolism. Again, I said everything is about attention. Um, Tom Cruise is sort of the ultimate in sort of attention sucking, and everybody wanted the amount of attention that Tom Cruise had. So it's a fun symbol I should have played around with some more too. Celebrity culture, what are signifiers and symbols of success in the attention world, things like that. There's another strip in the sequence. I think I did 4 or 5 where I think somebody says something in the dirt looks like, oh goodness, I can't even remember who's the guitar player, uh, who's married to Lance Armstrong, Sheryl Crow. They just start to see these things. Anyway, I should have done more with that. Who are the animals? Um, I really enjoy thinking about animals, and so in the junkyard there are these egrets, there are these raccoons. Did I do more? Yeah. There's this thing I call a chicken frog, even though it looks mostly like a chicken. Um, Uh, and this chicken frog is quoting from, sorry, I'm laughing at my own stuff here. This chicken frog is sort of quoting from 12-step programs. Your best thinking got you here. These egrets are seen as, quote, immigrants because they're trying to create their own country, so they need to think about immigration policy. This is 2006, but still doing that. So the animals, even though I'm sort of like happily describing how much animals were in the strip, I think they also, again, could have been used in a more ritualistic way, in a more sacred way. Still funny, of course, but I think I could have used them as symbols a little more often. Maybe the animals guide them to certain places, to certain new places, to another confrontation, to a safe place, etc. I didn't do much with that kind of stuff. What are the markings? Um, Hutch's favorite way of marking things was graffiti. And so here he is inventing some acronym that's about 30 letters long. And that stands for guys just trying to eke out a living with our values intact in a world determined to turn us into quiet, unobtrusive machinery parts in their relentless plan to pillage the earth. That's the acronym. Silly. And here he is carving something into the wet cement. Um, Here is Nora, and she's writing shop here and die ugly, which I think is a pretty good phrase, and she's writing it, and that's sort of one of her first appearances, and Hutch is uh, very interested and sort of in love with her as a result. Um, didn't do much with markings, much more than that. I could have. I could have. What is the beginning? Um, so this is the beginning. These were the first two strips, even though I might have redrawn them at some point. Now I can't remember, but they just decide. He's reading the newspaper. They're in a diner or something. That's it. I'm seceding. I'm forming my own country. You with me? And Oswald's kind of with him, but he's got all these designs on getting popular in the culture, so it's not so easy for him. We recap it here. Oswald, I'm forming my own country. You with me or against me? Um, he says, sounds fun, but it's not fun. I'm serious. And so the beginning is pretty clear cut. I wanted that to be a clear beginning. What are the confrontations? So there are lots of confrontations. Um, Particularly, I mentioned when the corporate people come down and they want to colonize the junkyard. Um, Hutch is screaming. That's one of my favorite drawings of him screaming. Um, Hutch is literally crushed under a bulldozer here, and it's actually sort of recreation of something probably 15 years prior where he was also crushed under a bulldozer. Um, so I wanted to sort of redraw that confrontation. The Hutch always loses to the in the corporate um, in the battles with the corporations, and that particular confrontation I wanted to draw for a second time. What are the travels? Sorry for speeding through that. Um, the women of the planet at some point decide to travel off of the planet. They get in their spacesuits. They fashion some sort of space vehicle and say, "Have fun destroying the world, losers." Um, they're up in space, taking a look down. Meanwhile, the guys have hooked a fuel tank, a whole fuel truck up to the barbecue, and they're just having bonfires and stuff. I asked my friend Margot, who was helping me, who helped me later write a strip, um, what would happen if all the women of the planet left, and she said Thunderdome. That was her one-word answer, and so I sort of riffed on that idea. So, but travels I didn't do much more of. There should have been more travels. There should have been reconnaissance travels. There could have been. There were some that I didn't. That I'm not showing you here. Especially one of the longer stories has one of the corporate. The corporate boss travels down into the land of quote the poor, meaning everything else, and he has one of his lackeys with him, and then the boss and the lackey have to separate because um, be, they become the boss ostracizes the lackey. But I never had Hutch and his people on the other side do much in the way of traveling. They pretty much stayed put. I should have had a traveler, and not just one, not just Nora for laughs here, but I should have had somebody who goes out and scouts. Maybe I should have done that to Oswald, frankly, the character who sort of wants to be in the culture a little more. I mean, I kind of did that a little bit, where he every once in a while becomes successful. This was before social media too much, so he gets a successful YouTube show or successful, I think even a public access show at some point, um, but not really venturing into the other world, which I should have done. So it's sacrificed. Um, oh, this was a fun series of strips that I think actually worked pretty well. This boy, this baby, pretty sure it's a boy, is sacrificed because the uh, he always gravitates towards the Warner product. Warner is like a giant corporation, kind of like Procter and Gamble or something, and so they make everything. And so they take this boy from the mother, and nurture it and make it a perfectly trained consumer. And they even give him negative stimulation when he goes to a quote competing cola. It's one sequence, sorry, where that I think uses the idea of sacrifice pretty well. Again, I could have done more with it though. Who are the lost? Um, uh, the Bloomer character was kind of lost in general. Um, he, more than anybody, was affected by the culture in ways that confounded him. He was scared and awed by it. His attempts to integrate into the culture went horribly awry and were amateurish and ineffectual and overly excited. So there was a sequence where he just one of his ways of giving up was to become a vampire, and he's carrying around this coffin, this refrigerator box, uh, as a coffin, which you are supposed to do if you're a vampire. You're supposed to sleep in the dirt, in the earth that you were born. It was sort of depicting him as lost. He even depicting his origin a little. He was born in a 73 gremlin, he says. Um, and these images of Bloomer sort of wandering the landscape, um, trying to connect with his quote real past. I actually kind of like these strips. I wish I could have done more with those as well. Um, so who speaks to the other side? What are we going to see here? Oh yeah, this is. I see how many of these I have. Yeah, there are a couple examples. Um, the Money Warrior. Just before the financial crash in 2008, I created. There was quite a zealous amount of. There was a lot of excitement about the stock market and stuff, and so I created this character who sees through that. He was very excited about the stock market. He understood the stock market. He could see the forces, and so he was always telling the real people about what they should invest in, etc. Another example, I fascinated with the idea of the other side, was this Art Bell type of radio host who is in some sort of house out in New Mexico or something, and um, and he is communicating with the underworld. He's communicating with aliens and magicians and the larger forces that are invisible, that we don't even really know because other forces sort of cloud them over. So anyway, it's uh, are is there a group Poultry Mind? Have you wanted to sell your kidneys for the reptilian races, sunspots, things like that? Art Bell sort of the radio host was always somebody who claimed to speak to the other side, and so I sort of recreated a version of that. I Had I kept the strip going, I would have worked with this character some more. I sort of like those. Who are the dead or the resurrected? Um, Bloomer again, that image again of somebody dying in the dirt. In this example, Bloomer wanted to completely let himself be subsumed and become, quote, a gravel spirit. Um, he's entirely covered in grass and gravel here. Um, do I have another image of that? No. But that is definitely, oops, pardon me, that is definitely an example where um, I was often letting the characters come pretty close to death just from entropy. Um, and But Bloomer wanted to be resurrected. And again, this is another strip that I could have, or another theme or image I could have used farther, gone with farther. Where is the other world? Um, as I told you earlier, there's a sequence where the corporate head goes down into the quote underworld, or the down where the quote poor people live. That's the only time I really did that. Um, I didn't do the reverse, which is have the people in the junkyard make it up to the corporate world. I did once with Oswald, but it was played for laughs a little more. Um, but that other world, that's again, those are two real worlds though that I'm pitting next to each other. I never really played around with the other side, this sort of other psychic world. And so, what are the parables? Oh, look, it's me holding the book. So, kind of like, kind of like Celia, who I mentioned before, and kind of like Charles Schultz, I think my that whole book was an attempt to um, tell parables and to sort of like reveal a sort of inner landscape. And I think comics are great at that. I think comic strips are great at that. The one thing I said at the end of the parable section was that it's comics are very good at at communicating in a single person's internal landscape, but I also think they're really good at a larger communal landscape, and I'd like to see more examples of that. And I'm sorry I didn't show more. Cartoonists tend to work in as solitary creatures and tend to reveal themselves, um, their own pluralities in solitary ways, or as a solitary person. But it doesn't have to be that way. So thanks for watching this, and for those of you who, let's see if that's the end. Those of you who know that I'm currently working on a new project, and I made this presentation in order to sort of infuse some better ideas and some more quote holy ideas into that project. So I hope I'm doing that. I hope, and if you're keeping track uh, or want to hold me accountable, then please do so. Thanks very much, and I hope your work is coming along great too.